Okay, I'm pretty sure everybody here has a busy day, and I don't want to hold you up any longer than necessary. Just want to say good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining our webinar today. I'm Gary Cassidy, the Director of Wellness and Employee Education and Communication at Corporate Synergies. And today we're going to be discussing the fine line between stressed and disengaged employees. Now, I know nobody on this webinar has ever been stressed at work or outside of work, but just bear with us as we go through this presentation and we can maybe learn a few things about how this impacts your employees. So today we're going to start talking about defining stress and level setting on stress and talking about good stress and bad stress. Believe it or not, we're going to talk about high interval training. We're going to be talking about what engaged and disengaged looks like and the different personalities, the impact of disengaged employees, the physical manifestation of stress, identifying burnout, leveraging your wellness program, re-engaging the disengaged, attracting top talent, and last but not least, we're going to be talking about your choices. So defining stress. Stress is not a new term and topic. As a matter of fact, Janos Hugo Bruno Cellier, in his A Syndrome Produced by Diverse Noxious Agents, published in 1936, coined the term stress and defined it as this: the nonspecific response of the body to any demand for change. Now, some of you may have thought that I would have a negative definition there, because a lot of times people think of stress and they think of it only in a negative way. But the fact of the matter is that stress is just stress. It can be good and it can be bad, depending upon the situation and the duration of the stress that you're feeling. So let's take a look at that. So we're going to level set. Not everyone who is stressed is disengaged. So somebody can be stressed, but they can still be engaged in the work, in their life, and what they're doing. Not everyone who is disengaged is stressed, especially depending upon your personality type. Everyone has a different threshold for stress, and you know these people. Some people seem to thrive on stress and pressure and meeting deadlines, and it motivates them. And for other people, it makes them shut down. So it all depends upon who they are and what their threshold for stress actually is. But it's important to know that even with a high threshold for stress, everyone has a breaking point. I don't care if it's your high performers. I don't care if it's people in your office that are willing to volunteer for everything, and they seem like they have endless energy and endless focus. They have a breaking point too, just as much as people who may be disengaged or just experiencing minor stress. We all have that breaking point. So when stress is good stress is beneficial and motivating. So when would you feel good stress? Well, for my personal example right now is prepping for this presentation. I'm having good stress because I'm excited to do this presentation. And again, stress is just the heightening of the senses, which is why I'm able to be excited, to project, to really convey the message for this presentation. And when other people feel good stress, it might be a pre-game, pre-performance, pre-presentation. They're getting primed for an activity. But the thing to understand about good stress is that it's short-term acute stress known as the fight or flight response. You'll see it in rabbits all the time. Rabbits, they sense a predator, boom, they burst out of the way. That's flight or flight response. It's what helps us avoid danger, and it helps us become aware of things that are going on around us. But again, it's just a short-term burst, and that's important to keep in mind. Think about a deadline that's staring you in the face. It's going to stimulate your behavior to manage the situation effectively, rapidly, and more productively. When good stress goes bad, though, it goes bad. Bad stress causes anxiety or health problems. Sometimes bad stress can paralyze you into inaction, or another word for that is procrastination. You feel overwhelmed. You don't know how to get started. And chronic stress, that's stress that's not short term, that is stress that's long term, produces negative health effects, both physical, emotional, and mental, over an extended period of time. Some examples of this: inability to concentrate or complete tasks, get sick more often with colds, body aches, and headaches, changes in appetite or trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, irritability or more angry or anxious than usual. Chronic stress occurs when we repeatedly face stressors that take a heavy toll, and this is important, it feels inescapable, that there's nothing you can do to escape this stress. So, I told you we were going to talk about HIIT, high intensity interval training. This is a way to exercise where HIIT alternates periods of intense effort with less intense recovery periods. HIIT workouts provide improved capacity and conditioning as compared to steady state cardio, a steady amount of effort over an extended period of time. So, for example, if you're on the treadmill in the gym, you can set it for 4.5 miles an hour. You can set your timer for 60 minutes. You keep the elevation set to 0, and you just run for those 60 minutes at the same exact pace, doing the same exact thing. On the other hand, if you were to be on that same treadmill and you kept that same steady pace, but you increased your incline and then you decreased your incline over time, that would raise your heart rate, it would lower your heart rate, and it would raise and it would lower, and it would increase the intensity of your workout, as well as your cardio burn and your breathing capacity, and it would be a more beneficial workout than just a static one-level run that you're taking. And this can also be applied to people during the work week. So, in an ideal world, nobody start laughing yet. In an ideal world, your HIIT workday might look like you come in at 9 a.m., you're somewhere between low to average stress, you're getting yourself organized with your workday. Around 10 a.m., the emails start coming in, you start focusing on work, maybe you have a presentation at 11 a.m., you spike into that high stress. And then after that presentation, there's all the follow-up that has to happen. So maybe around 12, your stress falls a little bit more. And then around 1 p.m., if you're lucky enough, fingers crossed, you get to take some lunch. So you have some recovery time, but then you're right back at it at 2 p.m., back to the stress. 3 p.m., it's almost the end of the day. You need to get stuff done. You're trying to crank things out, respond to emails. 4 p.m., you start to wind down, getting your list together for what you're going to do for the next week. And then you go home at 5 p.m. and 6 p.m., and your stress level drops to absolutely 0. This is where the laughing usually starts. But this is what an ideal workday might look like. But we all know that we rarely have an ideal workday. Then that happens is what we affectionately call the creep. 7 a.m., you're just waking up. 8 a.m., you're driving into work. 9 a.m., you're getting ready again. But by 10 a.m., you're really under pressure to get things done. It doesn't change at 11 a.m., goes down a little bit at 12, goes up at 1, goes down at 2, goes up at 3. Even 4 p.m. as you're leaving for the day, you're still somewhere right at the cusp of that high stress level. And then, of course, once you get home at 5 p.m. and 6 p.m., you have no stress at all. laughing again here. So then we take another look at it. So let's say you had a day with a lot of creep, and then you came in the next day and you said, I can't do that again. I feel really burned out. So what you decide to do instead is you say, you know what, instead of coming in at 9, I'm going to come in at 8. But then at 8 a.m., you're setting up for the day, but then 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you add an extra hour onto the day. You're functioning mostly in that high stress area. And then at 6 p.m. when you come home, it automatically goes away, which we know that it doesn't. But then what happens is if you don't feel like you're as productive with the extension, you come in and you say, I'm not getting ahead, I'm behind, I don't want to work the weekend, so I'm going to come in at 7 a.m. and then by 8 a.m. you're stressed all the way through to 5 p.m., 6 p.m., you're still a little bit stressed. You noticed at 1 p.m. there was no lunch involved, there was no break involved. You just came in at 7 a.m. and you worked straight through to 6 p.m. And you think you're going to get ahead, and that's how you're feeling. So the HIT work week, what are the side effects of working too much? We're going to talk short-term effects, and then later on we're going to talk long-term effects. But if we just look at it in a very narrow focus, and we look at information from the World Health Organization and the Institute of Labor Organizations, studies have shown that working more than 55 hours a week can have negative impact on your health. So let's say that it is a 12-hour work week and you do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Imagine how you're going to feel at the end of that day. So is working too much harmful? Yeah. The problem is that a 40-hour work week nowadays, and we all know this, is the exception rather than the rule. The reasons can include an overload of emails, being accessible 24/7, issues creating boundaries, being short-staffed. But the problem also is that working more than 55 hours a week can be attributed to coronary artery disease, chest pain, discomfort, and in some cases, stroke, when we look at the long-term effects. So what are the side effects of working too much? A lot of you may have recently been hearing about cortisol. And your cortisol levels, which is the primary stress hormone, increases, which can lead to brain fog, high blood pressure, and a host of other problems. So while you may think that working at this level day after day after day after day is going to get you ahead, you're going to get caught up, the fact of the matter is that the longer you do that and the longer you fall into what I'll effectively call is a work cycle trap, you're going to start to be less productive. You're going to have, again, the brain fog, your blood pressure is going to be up, and a health of other problems. And the issue is, while we may force ourselves to perform physically and cognitively on a high level, in reality, we're tapping out our reserves. So there's nothing left to give, which is why some of the signs of an unhealthy work-life balance can be that you stop taking care of yourself. You're not focused on your mental health because you're so focused on being productive. Your work no longer feels meaningful. It just feels like a grind. You constantly worry about job performance because, again, brain fog, high blood pressure, high cortisol levels. Even though you're working hard, you still don't feel like you're getting the results that you're looking for. You have trouble establishing boundaries. Remember, you went from a 9 a.m. to a 4 a.m., and then you went from an 8 to a 5, and then you went to a 12-hour day. And then a lot of times it rolls over into the weekends. So it's really hard once you get in that cycle to not feel these side effects, and it almost in a way becomes a normal experience for you. This is where the chronic aspect of this becomes incredibly important. So if we look at HIT and we look at the ideal, the work week ideal, we say, okay, Monday, I'm going to come in, I'm going to get ready for the week, I'm going to ramp up. Tuesday, I'm going to hit it hard. Wednesday, hump day. All I can see is that camel walking through the office in that commercial. Thursday, you're back at it. Friday, you start to wind down. Your tasks are getting done. And then your Saturdays and Sundays are yours. However, the creep kicks in, even on the work week. Monday, you come in, you're hitting it hard. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're all up in the high stress area. And yet somehow you're expected on Saturday and Sunday to rest and recover. Again, if this is a fluke of a week, there's a good chance that a good weekend where you're resting and you're relaxing and you're able to block out work, you're able to recover a little bit. But again, on a chronic level, doing this week after week after week after month, it's going to have a significant impact on your employees' health. So let's look at a red flag week where you decide, I'm not getting it all done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so I'm going to work from home and I'm going to do some stuff on Sunday and I'm going to do some stuff on Saturday. Again, once in a while, if that happens, that's fine. But over time, it's going to start to increase your burnout. You're going to start to feel stressed, and it could push you to feeling disengaged and disillusioned with your job and your company and the work that you're actually providing. So let's talk about the work week, and we're going to talk about the Sunday scaries. I would say show of hands, but I can't see anybody. How many people feel totally relaxed and not even worried about Monday on a Sunday? Or is it a case that around 5 o'clock, even though maybe you've been proactive and you said, okay, I'm going to make a list of things I need to do and I'm going to prioritize them with the A's and the B's and the C's, you still don't feel relaxed on Sunday before that work week starts on a Monday, especially if you work Saturday and Sunday. So based on Talker research, the average American experiences the Sunday scaries 36 times a year. And if you do the math, you only have 52 Sundays that we can really look at. So 69% of the time, Americans are having scary Sundays. 32% of those define this feeling as anxiety. 17 define this feeling as dread. 23% says Sundays are harder to enjoy because of thoughts of next week. When we dive in a little further, 36% were stressed about what needed to get done next week. So they're having what we call anticipatory stress. They haven't gotten there yet, but they're worked up about it already without even having to do it, 28% were stressed about what needed to get done before the week. 33% were stressed about how the week will go. Again, anticipatory, imagined stress for things that haven't even happened. And 1 in 7 cite burnout and not getting enough rest as the culprit on a Sunday night at about 14%, because they lay there in bed and they play this over and over in their head about what they think is going to happen, how it's going to happen. And we all know from experience that what we imagine our week to be on Monday is vastly different from what happens throughout the week. So we know that it's going to change. But this is what happens to 69% of employees throughout the weeks and the years as they go by. So what does a hit work year look like? And I call this ideal because this was back way before things changed, way before the pandemic, way before a lot of the things, we always thought, you know, during the year, the thing I can look forward to is that I'm going to have a month here or there where I can catch up, where things are going to quiet down for me, and I'm going to be able to do what I need to do, whether it's in July or August, or whether it's at the end of the year in December, that those 2 weeks between Christmas and New Year's, I have time to regroup and gather myself and get ready for that. But what we find, especially in the benefits community, and especially over time, is that we're seeing the creep, because January, instead of becoming an ease into the year, is just a carryover from the year before, especially if you're doing contributions, if you're funding HSAs, if you're funding FSAs, HR, whatever it is, it carries over. And then February starts to go down a little bit. March, you get a little bit of a lull, but for those of you who have June renewals, April and May are hard months because you've got to hit those renewals. And then we have June, we have July, August might go down a little bit if you're lucky, but right now you're in pre-renewals. You may be shopping for new carriers. And then we start to go into the October, November open enrollment season, and September, October, November, December. And you can see from the ideal to the creep, we have less of that time that we say we have downtime. We have time to regroup and reassess and get ourselves pulled back together. But the fact of the matter is that there really doesn't seem, from people that I talk to in corporate synergies and our customers and all the things that I'm reading, is that nobody really feels like there's any downtime anymore, that they're functioning in a high stress environment most of the time. And I think that's true in many, many, many organizations, especially when we're looking at benefits organizations. But here's the crazy part. We take a look at this red flag hit work year, and we haven't even layered on the second most or first most, depending on how you prioritize, the second most important thing that we all need to keep in mind that we seem to forget about. Life. On top of everything that you're doing in work, in the high stress levels that you're hitting throughout the year, where you feel as though, and your employees feel as though, there's no time to catch your breath or regroup, you have life happening over top of everything. You have holidays, you have vacation, you have birthdays, you have all these other things going on that layer on top of that stress. So even though you may be having lower stress at work, personal things that are going on are impacting that. So question, how many people, and again, I can't see hands raising, this is much better in person, have ever seen the TV show Severance? I got hooked on it, just finished the second season, angry that I have to wait for the third season. But for those of you who have never seen Severance, aside from all the side drama, what it really is a look at the dichotomy between work and personal life, your work-life balance. So imagine this. This is first episode in Severance. You have the main character. He leaves his home. He drives into work. As soon as he goes in the office to go up to the floor, all of a sudden he transitions into work mode, and he doesn't have the ability to think about anything at home. Nothing work life. He is just Gary the employee, and that's all he knows. And he spends all day, 9 hours, 10 hours a day working, and all he thinks and all he knows is work. And then at the end of the day, when he leaves the office, he gets back in the elevator. As he's going up in the elevator, he transitions again into life, into his normal daily life, his home life, and he forgets about everything at work. How many of us wish that we could do that on some level? But the fact of the matter is we know that while we're at work and we're performing at high levels and high to average stress, that we can't shake all of these things that are happening in our life. Wedding, divorce, retirement, new house, selling a house, college, student loans, elder care, child care, legal issues, pregnancy, childbirth, major injury or illness, death, addiction, job loss, marital issues, relationship issues, mortgage, holidays. Even holidays are stressful. We have no ability to separate one from the other. So on top of all that work stress that we're feeling, and as much as we try to control it when we're at work, that impacts us. It also impacts us when we're at home on the weekends, when we're supposed to be relaxing. The work stuff is still grinding around in our heads and we can't help it. Especially if we're tied to our phone 24/7 and we're constantly looking at answering emails, or we sneak in 5 or 6 hours on Saturday and Sunday. It interferes with the quality of our personal life. And this is where stress and disengagement really start to come into play when we holistically look at ourselves as a whole person who has these experiences that are going on. So what does an engaged person look like? An engaged person at work, highly involved in and enthusiastic about their work and their workplace. They're psychological owners, meaning they take responsibility for their ability to focus and produce during the day. They drive performance and innovation, and they actively move the organization forward. Of those who are engaged, 17% have higher productivity, 21% have higher profitability, 10% have higher customer satisfaction, 41% have lower absenteeism, 24% have less turnover in high turnover organizations, 59% have less turnover in low turnover organizations, 70% have fewer safety incidents, and 40% have fewer defects and quality issues. That defines an engaged employee in an organization. So what does disengaged look like? Dropping productivity, dropping quality of work, going quiet. That's a dead giveaway. Somebody who's normally gregarious, going quiet, something's going on there. Increased anger and lashing out. Increased time spent away from their desk. Avoids coworkers, lunch, and other events, mostly because of their stress and anxiety that they're feeling and their drive to deliver. Increasingly late to work or leave early. Uses sick days as often as possible, and doesn't want to take on more challenges or responsibilities because they feel like their cup is already full. But here's the kicker. Actively disengaged employees, based on Gallup poll and also studies from Virgin Pulse, which is now called Personify Health, who hadn't heard the news, they actively found that disengaged employees cost the United States between $483 billion to $605 billion each year in lost productivity. And that's a lot. This is one of my favorite sayings: progress, not perfection. But you're going to find people of different mindsets are going to look at this and have a different reaction. For some people, they're going to say, well, progress doesn't matter. It has to be perfect. And some people are going to say, it really is the progress that you make, and you always try to do the best that you can. And the reason different people have different reactions to this statement is pretty clear. It's because, shocker, we're not all the same. You have different personality types. You have type A, who's the go-getter. They're impatient, they're overbooked, they're overstretched, stretched, they have high standards, they're competitive, they're goal-oriented. Even when things go right, they still don't think it's good enough. So they're never satisfied with themselves or their performance, and they always feel that they can always do more. And as a direct result, they never pat themselves on the back because they can always find a problem with something that they did. Then we have the type Bs. These are the dreamers. They're grounded, they're even-tempered, they're social, they're sensitive, they're supportive, they're understanding. They tend to be very social and always know the right thing to say. And we have our type C, the perfectionist. They're detailed-oriented, they're overly technical, they're reserved, organized, ambitious, they crave stability. They like routines and a set lifestyle and avoids anything that disrupts it. This is a very specific type of personality that will drive very deeply into stress, chronic stress, as well as the type A's, because type A, never good enough. Type C has to be perfect, and they like their routine. You break their routine, it flusters their whole day. And then we have the Ds, the mainstays. They're peaceful, they're relaxed, they're consistent, they're isolated, they're introspective, they're sensitive, anxious and isolated, even if they don't look like it on the outside. They're great at covering. They may feel all of the anxiety and the stress and things like that. But if you look at them on a daily basis, it looks like they got everything under control and you have no reason to worry about them. Same thing can be said for the type A. The type A is producing stuff left and right. They're on top of it. No problems there. Type C, everything they do comes out just right. No problems. Type B, everybody likes them. They have no problems. So you look at these different types and you think that only certain ones have stress and anxiety, high cortisol levels. But the fact is, on some level, they all experience the same types of things. And the impact of disengaged employees, such as occupational pressures and fears, are far and away the leading source of stress for American adults, and these fears have steadily increased over the past few decades. And we know this to be true because we've lost those times during the year where we can take a breath, regroup, reorganize our files, clean up our folders, come up with project plans, and do all that. It doesn't seem to be that kind of time that's available anymore. Disengaged employees universally feel like they're no longer being listened to. And disengaged employees have 37% higher absenteeism, 49% more accidents, 60% more errors, 18% lower productivity, 16% lower profitability, 30% lower job growth, 65% lower share price, and 50% have a voluntary turnover. Their response to stress is, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this. It's not worth it. I'm just grinding my wheels here. And this is from the American Institute of Stress and the American Psychological Association. So one would think that stress is all in your head. If you're stressed, it's just your head feeling ready to explode. But stress, especially chronic stress, over an extended period of time, physically impacts your health. That's why anybody who's ever suffered through one of my wellness discussions will always hear me say that wellness is more than the B and E, the blood, the broccoli, and the exercise, the biometric screening, the health assessment, and getting out there and walking. It's about multiple dimensions of well-being, social, nutritional, financial, all of these different aspects of well-being and the impact that it has on your body. Not everybody will have the same stressors, but everybody does have stressors. And the physical manifestations of stress can include heart disease. It increases the heart flow, and the heart rate and the blood flow. Stress causes the release of cholesterol and triglycerides. Stress can cause serious cardiac problems, including heart attacks. Asthma. Stress can cause asthma symptoms to kick into overdrive. Have you ever had that moment where you've been so stressed and had so much anxiety that you just can't catch your breath? Stress can make wheezing and coughing worse. Asthma, stress, and anxiety can create a vicious circle. There's also tobacco. Stress can increase the risk for the buildup of fatty substances inside arteries. Stress can increase cigarette use when under pressure. Stress can cause temporary increase in blood pressure, and blood pressure goes up. The stress can cause your body to make hormones, cortisol. When you're emotionally stressed, that may damage your arteries. Frequent temporary spikes in blood pressure from stress can damage your blood vessels, your heart, and your kidneys. Diabetes. Stress can increase the likelihood of bad behaviors, such as unhealthy eating and excessive drinking. Stress can also cause the body to produce especially high levels of stress hormones, cortisol again, which drive blood sugar levels up for people with type 2 diabetes. Headaches. Stress is considered one of the most common triggers for headaches. Episodic stress headaches can last from 30 minutes to a week. Frequent stress headaches or migraines occur less than 15 days a month for at least 3 months. Imagine having a headache for 15 days. Frequent episodic stress headaches may become chronic. And then we have depression and anxiety. While the stress to a threat in a situation and anxiety is a reaction to the stress, chronic stress can lead to emotional problems such as depression, panic attacks, or other forms of anxiety and worry, and gastrointestinal problems. If you're stressed, it can cause an increase in blood and oxygen flow to the stomach, cramping, and imbalance in gut and bacteria inflammation. Stress is also a common factor in many GI conditions such as chronic heartburn and irritable bowel syndrome. Obesity. Chronic stress can lead to an increase in appetite and cravings for food. Weight change may also result due to hormonal changes triggered by stress. The body's response to stress has been linked to changes in metabolism, insulin, type 2 diabetes, and fat storage. And here's a funny one. Not funny, ha-ha, but funny, interesting. Nutrition. Stressful experience can lead to a change in healthy eating habits, but they happen in 2 different ways. On average, 30% of people decline food when stressed and lose their body weight. On average, 70% of people eat more when they're stressed. But for the 30 people who decline food when stressed and lose their body weight, the impact that it has on their body is it creates headaches. Their body starts to feed off the fat and the muscle in the body. They're more tired, they're less focused, they're not replenished, and it becomes a vicious recurring cycle. So how do we identify burnout? What do you look for in employees when you're trying to identify employees who are right at that edge? They've gone beyond stressed, they've gone beyond disengaged, and they're at burnout mode. The overload, the frenetic employee who works towards success until exhaustion. This type of burnout typically leads to stress overload. These are typically your type A's and your type C's who believe that they can finish and complete any project and solve any problem. We have boredom. These are the disengaged employees. The employee who feels a lack of personal development. These under-challenged workers tend to manage stress by distancing themselves from work, a strategy that leads to depersonalization and cynicism. These are our type B's and D's. And then the last one is the worn out one. The employee who chooses to give up in the face of stress. They've had enough, they're done. Even though these individuals want to achieve a certain goal, they lack the motivation to plow through the barriers, which is typically going to be your type D. So what can your wellness program do to help you identify and tackle these chronic conditions and symptoms that your employees and even yourself may be experiencing on a daily basis over months and years of time? Employers can leverage their workplace wellness programs as part of their employee engagement strategy. But the important thing, and we touched on this earlier, is to invest holistically. That means, again, getting beyond the BB&E. Employee engagement will not improve unless financial health, mental well-being, stress management, sleep habits, social well-being are addressed. Just think of yourself. Your first kid is going to college, and you're going through the how the heck do I do a student loan form? How do I get this approved? How does the process even work? You're going through elder care issues. You're going through child care issues. You have all these things that are going on, and they're impacting your sleep and your ability to focus and creating stress, and your financial and your emotional and your mental well-being are all starting to be impacted. That's why a lot of organizations, when they have their wellness programs, they offer financial well-being as a wellness activity. They offer courses, and they offer resources that they can have access to, emotional well-being, social well-being, all these different things to help provide solutions and help employees manage their stress and their anxiety. But it's important that you align the goals, aligning wellness goals with productivity goals. Focus on healthy habits that boost their work performance. So as we said, if you have an employee who is having trouble with childcare and they don't know what to do, or they're back to work and they didn't have to pay for childcare, now they do have to pay for childcare, point them to the benefits plan. Point them to the EAP. Point them to resources that can help them solve those problems so they don't feel like they're in it alone. And the other thing with the wellness program is to foster a culture of wellness. Having a wellness program is a thing. That's all it is. But it's not the same as fostering a culture of wellness that permeates your organization and is led from the top all the way down to the bottom. And it shows the employees, the spouses, that you as an organization are engaged in their health and well-being as much as you are with their success and their ability to deliver in the organization. A lot of people, when they're looking for new jobs now, they look at organizations for having services and things of this nature available because it's important to them. It's important to remember that employee wellness is more than just biometrics and health screenings. It goes well beyond that. And a lot of that happened and started to happen during the pandemic when people were working remotely. Some people working remotely were like, because they can focus on their work. But other people who are more social, that was an incredibly difficult time for them. And that's when all these different dimensions of well-being started significantly coming to a head. So how do we re-engage the disengaged? One might think that compensation is the way to go, bonus and raises. But the fact of the matter is that it's just a temporary fix. Once they get that bonus or raise, a month or two down the road, it just blends into their daily budget and they're back to the same problems. It doesn't solve anything. Career-wise, staff development and training, higher positions training, up-to-date certificates, providing clear pathways to success, especially for those in the D personality category who feel like there's nowhere to go. Where am I going to move in this organization? Do I have anywhere to move, or am I going to be stuck in this cycle? The ultimate benefit is staffing and increased headcount. Insert laughter here, because That includes payroll, it includes new hires, it includes everything that might impact the EBITDA of the organization as a whole. But a lot of times with those A's and those C's who are stressed and overworked, an additional resource could make all the difference between them going from stressed to disengaged to burned out and having them continue to be productive. And believe it or not, recognition, a simple thank you. Many employees want to be recognized for the work that they're doing, and that can be incentive enough to get your workers excited and ready to work. The work-life balance is very important, and as we talked about, provide your employees with student loan assistance, mental health support, maternity and paternity leave, help with childcare, help solve those life issues that can help them be productive in their work issues. As much as I love a good pretzel, but if I'm just mildly stressed, I can take a walk, I can decompress, I can do some yoga. You give me a pretzel, you feed me, I'm happy. But for people who are in that burnout level or the disengaged level, Pretzel Friday, Fruit Tuesday isn't necessarily going to cut it. It needs to be more meaningful and substantial for them. And only you can prevent burnout. And by you, I mean you, the employee, you, the employer, you, the manager, you, the supervisor, you, the district manager, you, the vice president. We have personal responsibility to manage our burnout and our stress, but it's also important for supervisors to identify when that is happening to head that off so that they don't lose a critical employee to the organization. The last one we're going to talk about is the extremes, and this one more applies to the A's and the C personality types. It's called high functioning depression and anxiety. High functioning is not an indication of depression or anxiety severity. It's a term that indicates you have the ability to carry out your daily activities despite symptoms of a mental health disorder. These high-functioning people look fine on the outside. They're getting their work done. They're going from A to B. They're delivering for you. Not everyone living with anxiety and depression exhibits the same level of external impairment. But when you can meet the demands of everyday life while also living with a mental health disorder, you may be experiencing high-functioning depression or anxiety. You can be high-functioning and still live with severe anxiety or depression. For example, if you're an exceptionally skilled worker at accounting, even on a low-performance workday, you might still appear to be on top of your game. And while one's internal landscape might be a complete mess, you're overanalyzing, you're worrying, you're sleep-deprived, you're able to present themselves as being fairly together. But these are some of the signs of being high-functioning, a high-functioning depressive or anxiety, working excessively, perfectionism, overachieving, which for most might not be a bad thing, but for people who fall into this category, it's a symptom. Internalizing emotions, masking symptoms with cheerful composure, internalized suicide ideation. This is why when I talk about wellness, and a lot of times people like to say that one of the dimensions of wellness is mental well-being. But I always separate that between emotional well-being, which is something that can be managed through lifestyle changes, and mental well-being, which requires care, treatment, sometimes therapy, or medication. These are two completely different animals. But this is where your high-functioning depressive and anxiety people tend to fall. They're burning out on a treadmill every day, but they refuse to give in, and they continue to deliver on a daily basis. So when you're talking about attracting top talent, whether it's Glassdoor, Comparably, Indeed, CareerBliss, JobCrowd, Vault, when a prospective employee types in your company name, employee benefits, and culture into their web browser, what results do you think they'll find? And what results do you want them to find? What do you want them to say about your organization? I'm not talking about the disgruntled employees who are going to go on their event. I'm going to talk about the people who have been in good standing and they left the organization. What results do you want future employees to find? So you basically have two choices when you're looking at your population. You can support and you can retain them. You can identify these symptoms. You can provide them with solutions and support to help them continue to be productive in the organization. Or you can choose to let them burn and then they'll leave. And that they may have been a critical part of your organization, but they didn't find the support and they weren't able to stick it out and to continue to provide for you the quality of work that they have been provided. All right. I am going to check the chat box real quick because it sounds like we have some questions here. Get these, yes, you will be able to get these slides. Yes, and the slides and recording will be available. And I agree with Deborah, home is just as stressful as work and understaffed there too. Yeah, I lived in both worlds, Sunday scaries and not now. So it's able to come out of that, which is great. Somebody's in the 70% with how they handle their nutrition. Someone says it's hard to add training to someone who is already at capacity though. Agreed. These are not easy solutions. None of them are. But to maintain the personnel and the quality of work, it's important that the company figures out ways to make those people feel heard and addressed. Question for me. Would you say most individuals are a combination of A, B, C, and D? And to that, I say you're absolutely right. For the purposes of the presentation, I, for lack of a better word, stereotyped your A's, your B's, and your C's, and your D's, but the fact of the matter is it can cross over all of them. It really can. So, would anybody like to, oh, is there one more? Nope. If anybody would like to unmute yourself or put something in the chat with an additional question, please feel free. We have about 4 more minutes. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have. Oh, thank you. Great performance. Great presentation. I appreciate that. See, this was good stress. Glad it was very informative. And my background is 8 years in the U.S. Air Force. It was 5 years working at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Philadelphia. I've worked in marketing, I've worked in public relations, and I've been here at Corporate Synergies for 20 years. I came in as a graphic designer, and over the years, through training and working with people much smarter than me, I've grown to love and understand and want to help people to be well and to be as productive and live a best life as they can. How do you get staff to participate in wellness activities? That's a whole nother presentation, which I have, but I'll give you the high-level notes. If you make wellness an activity, you're going to have hard time driving engagement. Because as we said, wellness shouldn't be an activity, it should be a culture. That means it's occurring in your organization 365 days a year, from annual physicals to preventive care, to health surveys, to blood work, to step-in activity challenges, to videos and quizzes, and all these different things that make up a wellness program, but it needs to be a continuous process, because if you go dark and you don't communicate about it, they're going to forget about it. Any application you can recommend to assist staff with managing stress. The good news is that there are a lot of free apps available through the App Store or Google Play that you can recommend for your employees that can help with meditation, stress relief, and things of that nature. But again, if you recognize someone who is high functioning, the best thing you can do is to help promote the EAP to them and seeking out the advice of their primary care physician. All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time and attendance and your feedback. If you have any questions ever about this, you can always email me directly at garyc@corpsyn.com, corpsyn.com, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. Thank you very much and have a great day.